Okay, so you probably think you finished these games. You did the main story, maybe some side quests, called it done. But there is a solid chance you walked right past some of the best stuff in there without even knowing it. We're talking hidden bosses, crazy gear, whole areas tucked away where most people never go. 15 PS5 games that are basically holding out on you, and today we are going through all of them. Imagine someone looked at every open world game ever made and genuinely got annoyed at how friendly they all are. Like someone sat down and said, what if we just punished people for being curious? That is Elden Ring. 200 hours in, and you are still finding caves you somehow walked past 3 times. Every single hill is hiding something. Every suspicious-looking wall has a decent chance of just not being real. You are never safe, and you are never done. And somehow that is the whole appeal. And then Shadow of the Erd Tree comes out, and it is not DLC in the normal sense. It is basically a whole other game they stuffed inside the first one. New map, new dungeons, bosses that will genuinely make you reconsider your entire approach to the game. Most open-world games' exploration feels like following a checklist. Go here, collect that, fast travel back. Elden Ring is different because you never actually know what you are walking into. You spot something glowing way off in the distance, you head toward it, and 20 minutes later you have fallen through a fake floor into an underground city that is somehow bigger than the overworld. It's the kind of game that makes you feel like a real explorer, rather than someone clearing icons off a map. It's hard, sometimes brutally hard, but that's kind of the whole point. Do not let the art style fool you. First time you see Outer Wilds, you think, okay, cute little space game, wooden ship, tiny solar system, seems chill. And then 22 minutes in, the sun explodes and you are dead, and you wake up in your sleeping bag and have to start the whole day over again. That is the entire game. You are stuck in this loop, and the only way out is to actually understand what is happening and why. What makes it genius is that you never get stronger. No upgrades, no better gear, no leveling up. The only thing that carries over between loops is what you learned. And that sounds simple until you realize how much there is to learn. One planet is physically crumbling into a black hole in real time while you are standing on it. Another one is slowly filling with sand the longer you wait. Every location in this solar system is doing something weird and dangerous, and it is all connected. The Archaeologist Edition comes with Echoes of the Eye, which adds this whole extra area that goes in a completely different direction tonally. That is all I will say about that. Bring a flashlight. There is genuinely nothing else like this game. The moment it all clicks, when you finally understand what you have been piecing together for hours, it is one of the best feelings gaming has ever produced. It's not an action game. It's not really a puzzle game either. It's more like the universe is a mystery novel, and you are just running around trying to read it before everything blows up again. Ghost of Tsushima was already the kind of game where you would just stop moving for no reason. Like the wind hits the grass at the right angle, and you just stand there holding the screenshot button like you were on vacation. Sucker Punch clearly looked at that and thought, yeah, let's do that again somewhere new. Ghost of Yotei takes you to a completely different part of Japan, set around Mount Yotei in 1603, and from what has been shown, it looks genuinely ridiculous in the best way. Snowy mountains, thick forests, hot springs, the whole thing looks like it was designed specifically to make you forget you had a main quest. And the first game was so good at that. You would just be riding somewhere and a bird would fly past and your brain would go, well, I should follow that. And 20 minutes later, you were at some hidden shrine you never would have found otherwise. That was not an accident. That was the whole design philosophy, rewarding you for being nosy. Yotei looks like it is pushing that even further with new traversal options and tools that open up how you actually move through the world. The game is not out yet, so there's only so much to say, but if it carries over even half of what made the first one special, you are going to spend an embarrassing amount of time completely ignoring the story because something caught your eye on a ridge somewhere. And honestly, that's not a problem. That's the whole point. Baldur's Gate 3 is the kind of developers themselves have gone on record saying they still find things they forgot they put in there. That is not a bit. That is just how dense this game is. Every single conversation, every room, every random barrel you walk past could be hiding something that sends you down a 3-hour rabbit hole you absolutely did not plan for. You can talk to animals, you can talk to corpses, you can pick up a random book off a shelf in some dungeon, and suddenly you have a whole new quest that connects to 3 other things you did an hour ago. The map is not the biggest you have ever seen, but that almost doesn't matter because every single inch of it is packed with something. There are entire areas most people never see on their first playthrough, full characters you can miss completely, storylines that only exist if you made a specific choice earlier or wandered into a specific corner of the map, and the game does not telegraph any of it, it just trusts that some players will find it. But here's the part that makes it genuinely special. The things you discover actually change what happens. Find a hidden passage and you bypass a boss entirely. Miss a certain room and you might lose a party member and never get them back. Exploration has actual weight here. It is not just collectibles and lore entries. It matters. If you're the type of player who checks every corner and reads every piece of paper you find, this game was basically built for you specifically. Astrobot is one of those games that tricks you. You run through a level, you have a great time, you get to the end and feel good about yourself, and then you find out you missed like half the stuff in there. Secrets tucked behind walls that look totally normal, hidden paths underneath the floor, entire areas that only open up if you do something random, like punch a specific plant or stand on a weird-looking tile and spin around. The game just sits there waiting to see if you are actually paying attention. And the levels themselves are genuinely creative in a way that a lot of bigger games are not. One moment you are tiny, running around like an ant through environments that are suddenly enormous. Next moment you are riding a giant sponge through a water level that somehow does not feel like a chore. Every world has its own thing going on, and every single one of them has at least one moment that catches you off guard. It is also just a beautiful game, like stop and look around beautiful. Everything is so polished and colorful that sometimes you forget you are supposed to be moving. And look, exploration does not have to mean hundreds of hours in some massive open world. Sometimes the best version of it is a tight little level where someone clearly spent a lot of time hiding stuff in every corner just to see if you would find it. Astrobot understands that completely. Most games hand you a map covered in icons and basically treat you like you need a GPS to walk across a parking lot. Death Stranding 2 gives you a mountain and some boots and just kind of stares at you. This is Hideo Kojima doing his thing again, and the whole game is built around the act of actually moving through a world rather than just teleporting between objectives. You are walking. You are climbing over rocks, wading through rivers, building ladders and zip lines that other real players can find and use in their own game. The whole thing is connected in this quiet way that is hard to explain until you experience it. And yeah, I have heard the walking simulator thing, but here's what people who say that are missing. The world is not just scenery you walk past, it is an obstacle that actively works against you. You are hauling cargo up a cliffside, and out of nowhere the sky changes and these invisible creatures start closing in, and suddenly your heart is going because you're in the middle of nowhere with a full load and nowhere to hide. The map has weather, terrain, enemies, and all of it affects how you plan each trip. It's less about combat and more about logistics and problem solving, and that sounds boring until you're actually in it. Death Stranding 2 takes everything the first game built and expands it pretty significantly. New regions, new tools, new ways to deal with a world that genuinely does not want you crossing it. If you're burnt out on open world games where exploration means jogging past empty space toward a marker, this is the complete opposite of that. The wait for Silksong has genuinely become its own thing at this point. Like, it stopped being about the game for a while and just became a running joke about how long it was taking. But the reason people lost their minds over it in the first place is because Hollow Knight was just that good. The first game had this underground kingdom that felt genuinely alive and interconnected in a way most games do not bother with. You could spend 60 hours in there and still find zones you somehow completely missed because you didn't hit a specific breakable wall or drop down a particular pit. There were no big glowing markers telling you where the good stuff was. You just had to be curious enough to look. And Silksong is supposedly bigger than that. You play as Hornet this time, and she moves completely differently. Faster, more agile, way more vertical than the original Knight ever was, which means the world can be built with that in mind. Tighter platforming, more complex routing, more of those moments where you squeeze through something you weren't sure you could reach and stumble into a whole new area with its own music and enemies, and you just feel unreasonably proud of yourself. That is genuinely the magic of these games. Nobody tells you where to go. You find a suspicious crack in a wall, and your brain goes, and 20 minutes later, you're somewhere completely unexpected. The original delivered that feeling consistently for dozens of hours. If Silksong actually comes out and holds up to even half of what people are expecting, it's going to absolutely destroy people's free time, possibly for months. Okay, so everyone knows the basic pitch. Angry dad, big axe, kills gods. Great story. But Ragnarok is sneakier than people give it credit for as an exploration game because it genuinely does not look like one from the outside. It presents itself as this fairly linear action game, and then you start poking around and realize every single realm is absolutely packed with stuff. Optional areas, hidden chests, side quests that are basically their own little self-contained stories, and puzzles where you will stand there staring at something on the other side of a gap for way too long trying to figure out the angle. But the thing that really makes it work is how the game layers its exploration over time. You show up somewhere early on and certain paths are just blocked or inaccessible, and you kind of file that away. Then hours later, you get a new ability and you go back and suddenly everything clicks. That weird statue makes sense now. That chain hanging from the ceiling finally has a purpose. The game is quietly trusting you to remember things and rewarding you when you do. There are entire boss fights sitting in optional areas that a huge chunk of players never even see because they stayed on the main path. Full encounters, proper bosses, just tucked away, waiting for people who are curious enough to wander off. And the 9 realms are all genuinely different from each other. Frozen wastelands, dense jungles, the actual land of the dead, each one with its own secrets stuffed into corners you are not necessarily meant to check. Play just the story and you will have a great time. Explore everything and you basically have 3 games worth of content. And honestly, some of the side stuff is the best stuff in there. On the surface, Tunic looks like the most harmless game on this entire list. Little fox, little sword, top-down adventure, fight some monsters, find some keys. You've seen this before, you know how this goes. Except you absolutely do not. People were forming entire online communities just to crack what this game was hiding. Not like casual fan theories either, full-on collaborative investigation, people sharing notes and screenshots and piecing things together like it was an actual mystery that needed solving. Here's the thing that makes Tunic so different. The game has an instruction manual, an actual in-game manual, like those old paper booklets that used to come stuffed inside game boxes back in the day. Except the pages are scattered all over the world, and a big chunk of them are written in a language you cannot read. And those unreadable pages are not just decoration. They are hiding answers to puzzles you haven't even realized are puzzles yet. I'm not going to get into what happens when things start clicking because that would genuinely ruin it. But I will say this, the game you think you're playing in the first hour is not the actual game. There's a whole other layer underneath everything, and most people don't even notice it's there until suddenly something makes sense and their brain just stops working for a second. Every strange symbol, every odd sound, every path that looks like a dead end, none of it is accidental. This game was built by someone who wanted curious players specifically and rewards them in ways that are hard to even describe without spoiling it. When you figure out what's really going on, you're going to want to grab someone and explain it to them immediately. And then you'll realize you can't, because ruining Tunic for someone should genuinely be illegal. Returnal is basically what happens when someone decides exploration should feel genuinely dangerous. Like not just difficult, actually threatening. You are an astronaut named Celine. You crash on this alien planet, you die, you wake up back at your ship, and you do it all over again. Except the world does not reset the same way. Rooms move around. Paths that did not exist before suddenly appear. Items end up in completely different places. Every single run is a different version of the same nightmare. And the lore in this game is something else. At some point, you will find a house, a completely normal-looking suburban house just sitting there in the middle of this alien hellscape. And every time you go inside, something happens that makes you feel deeply uncomfortable in a way that is hard to put into words. I am not saying anything else about that. The planet itself has these distinct biomes that all have their own personality. Creepy, overgrown forests, red desert wastelands, underwater ruins, each one packed with hidden rooms and secret pickups that make you meaningfully stronger. And that is where the tension comes from, because you lose almost everything when you die. So every time you spot a suspicious-looking side path, you have to make a real decision. Do you push into unknown territory and risk losing the good weapon you've been building around for the last 20 minutes? Or do you play it safe and probably miss something great? That risk is what makes finding a hidden room feel so satisfying here. It doesn't feel like checking a box, it feels like you earned it. Returnal is hard, and it is intense, and it will absolutely destroy you regularly. But for people who want exploration to actually mean something, it isn't a category of its own. Okay, so 18 quintillion planets. That is not something I made up for effect. That is the actual number. 18 quintillion procedurally generated worlds, and you could play every single day until you die and still barely scratch the surface of what is in there. Every planet is doing its own thing. Some are covered in mushrooms the size of skyscrapers. Some are frozen over with cave systems underground that just go on way longer than they have any right to. Some have acid rain slowly eating through your suit, while enormous worms are erupting out of the ground behind you. The variety is genuinely hard to wrap your head around. And here's the part of the story that makes it so interesting. This game launched in 2016, and it was rough. People were angry, the discourse was bad, it felt like a massive letdown. But Hello Games just kept going, update after update after update for years. And now it is one of the most fully featured exploration sandboxes ever made. Base building, underwater diving on alien worlds, flying between solar systems, finding creatures that look like a child drew an animal from memory and then something generated it in 3 dimensions. You can ride some of them. The game basically just hands you a universe and steps back. Want to be a space pirate attacking freighters? Go for it. Want to set up a quiet farm on a toxic planet and never talk to another living thing? Completely valid. There is no wrong way to exist in this game. If you have ever looked up at the sky and wondered what might actually be out there, this is the closest anything has come to letting you go find out. Just do not go in expecting to finish it. That is never happening. So you are Cal Kestis, you have got a lightsaber, you have got the Force, and you have got a poncho that is genuinely kind of questionable as a fashion choice, and you are dropped onto these enormous planets that are practically begging you to go poke around in every corner. Jedi Survivor takes everything the first game built and scales it up significantly. Each planet is this big interconnected web of shortcuts and paths that slowly open up as you get new abilities. Walls you can run across, gaps you can force pull yourself over, hidden areas tucked behind things you walked past 3 hours ago and couldn't figure out. It is very openly a Metroidvania in how it handles all of this, and it commits to that fully. You'll be moving through some canyon and you'll spot a ledge way up above you, and your brain will register it and move on because you can't get there yet. Then 10 hours later, you learn something new, and that ledge just pops back into your head and you fast travel back and climb up there, and there's a lightsaber part or a hidden boss just sitting there waiting. That loop of remembering and returning never really gets old. And Kobo specifically is just ridiculous in terms of how much is crammed into it. That planet alone could have been its own full game. Caves, puzzles, strange creatures, and an entire town you can actually help rebuild over the course of the game, which gives exploration this extra layer of purpose. Also, and this should not need saying, but exploring just feels cooler when you're doing it as a Jedi. Every other game wishes they had movement options this satisfying. This one actually earns it. This one is going to surprise some people because it is not some massive budget release with a huge marketing campaign behind it. Blueprints is this strange and genuinely clever game about exploring a mansion that literally rearranges itself between sessions. You get invited to this enormous estate, and each day you pick which rooms to go into, but the layout has shifted since last time. Rooms you already visited might be gone. New ones appear where there used to be nothing. The house just refuses to stay the same. And every room has something in it, a little puzzle, a secret, a fragment of story that slowly helps you understand what is actually going on in this place and why you were invited here in the first place. The whole thing feels like someone smushed a board game and a mystery novel and a haunted house together, and somehow it works. What makes it genuinely addictive is that you cannot see everything in a single run. You have to pick a direction and commit to it. Do you go toward the library or do you head down toward the locked basement? Each choice opens certain things up and closes others off, and that means every playthrough genuinely feels different rather than just slightly reshuffled. You are never just going through the motions because the motions keep changing on you. And underneath all of it, there's this real mystery getting pieced together slowly. Why is this mansion like this? Why are you here? What actually happened? For players who love exploring every corner of a space, this game literally rebuilds those corners every time you sit down with it. That is such a smart idea, and it's executed really well. Genuinely worth tracking down if you've never heard of it. The ocean is already unsettling on Earth, and Subnautica takes that feeling and cranks it up by making it alien. You crash land on a planet that is almost entirely water. No land, no safety, just ocean in every direction. And at first, it is genuinely beautiful. Shallow reefs, colorful fish, you are building a little underwater base and feeling pretty good about everything. And then you look down, and it gets dark, and you realize the ocean does not stop where you thought it did. It just keeps going. And there are sounds coming from down there that your brain does not know how to categorize. Subnautica is a survival exploration game where depth is everything. The shallow areas are safe and pretty, and basically a tutorial for what is coming. The middle depths are where things start getting uncomfortable, and the deep zones, the really deep ones, are straight up nightmare fuel. Massive creatures, crushing darkness, sounds that follow you, and also the best resources in the entire game, naturally. So the whole loop is basically the game daring you to keep going down, even though every instinct you have is telling you to go back up toward the light. And you go anyway, because you need one specific crafting material that only exists near the giant glowing leviathan that has already eaten your submarine once. The base building is also genuinely wonderful. Glass tunnels, observation rooms, little habitats you construct piece by piece while alien fish drift past the windows. It gives you this anchor, this home base, before sending you back out into the terrifying dark. For exploration that makes your hands actually sweat, nothing touches Subnautica. When people argue about the greatest open world ever made, Red Dead Redemption 2 always ends up in that conversation, and honestly, it is hard to argue against it. This is not a game that has a map full of things to do. It has a world that just exists. You are riding through the mountains, not going anywhere in particular, and you spot an abandoned cabin, and you go inside, and there's a journal in there, some handwritten entries about a person who lived there decades ago. No quest marker led you there, no reward pops up. It just exists, because Rockstar apparently decided that every single corner of this world needed a reason to be there. Every town has people with actual routines that run whether you are watching or not. Animals in the forests are just doing animal things. There's a man in a swamp building a house, and if you ride past him a few in-game days later, the house is further along. Nobody told you to check on that. The game just quietly does it. And the secrets in this game are genuinely absurd. People are still finding new stuff years after this came out. There are dinosaur bones scattered across the map. There are cult meetings you can stumble into. There's an actual robot. I am not elaborating on that. Just know it is there. Most open world games are pushing you constantly. Go here, do this, next mission. Red Dead actively wants you to slow down. Sit by a river, watch the lighting change, wander into the woods with no destination, and see what happens. The map goes from snowy mountain ranges to dense swamps to desert to full cities, and every single part of it feels like a human being made it deliberately. Not generated, not filled in, crafted. If there's one game that makes getting completely lost feel like the best possible use of your time, this is it.